Gaudi, ma'am. My topic is about non-institutional correction. These are community based in correctional programs that help in the reintegration of offenders. Community based in correction is an effective method of accomplishing the change in the behavior of the offenders by helping him to become a law-abiding citizen.
Ma'am, good evening classmate. Pag akong report dyan is non-institutional correction. Purpose sa non-institutional
Probation. It is a privilege granted by the court to a person convicted of a criminal offense to remain in the community instead of going to prison or jail. Probationer. A judge may grant probation as an alternative to imposing a jail sentence. The probation is ordered when the circumstances and seriousness of the crime suggest that the probationer is not a threat to society and the incarceration is not an appropriate punishment. The probationer may freely live in the community but must abide by certain conditions of probation for a period of time specified by the court and a report regularly to an appointed probation officer. General conditions of probation may include living where directed, participating in rehabilitation programs, submitting to drug and alcohol tests, and maintaining employment. Probationer may be required to show proof to the court that they have complied with all conditions of probation. If a probationer fails to comply with all required conditions, the court may revoke probation and require the probationer to serve a jail sentence. Ang probation, ang suspect di siya prisohon. Samtang ang parol, na priso na ang suspect pero hatagarap na siya og chance nga makagawas. Imbis na prisohon ang suspect, papilon siya og mga rehabilitation nga mga program aron mausog. Kibali, mura siya gi-rehab pero wa siya prisoha.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmates. I am Kim Spalin. This is the continuation of Miss Arcelis' report. Parole. Parole is the conditional release of prisoner from correctional institution after serving the minimum period of prison sentence. A parole mao na ang pagpagawa sa usa ka prisoner after niya masilbihan ang minimum nga niya nga sentensya. Palayaon siya but under certain condition or under supervision samtang gisilbihan niya ang nabilin na sentensya gawa sa prisuhan. When we talk about parole, the law that we should bear in mind is Article number 4103, the Indeterminate Sentence Law, meaning indeterminate ang sentensya, dili fixed, dili pod exact. Gitagaan ka og sentensya nga nay minimum ug maximum depende sa kadaghanon sa mitigating or aggravating circumstances. For example, ang penalty sa kaso nga pagpangawat kay na may minimum nga 6 years, unsa nay maximum nga 12 years. Mao na sa gitawag nga indeterminate sentence, why fix nga number of years sentence. Sa kaning atong example, when we talk about parole, kinahanglan sa kamoserve sa minimum sentence nga 6 years, mapriso sa kag 6 years before ka maka-apply og parole. Parole is the conditional release of prisoner from correctional institution after serving the minimum period of prison sentence. Who may grant parole to a prisoner? The Board of Pardons and Parole is the one who grants the parole to a prisoner. This is an agency under office of the Secretary of Justice. This will be further be discussed by my group mates. Who cannot be granted parole? Generally, it is not allowed to grant parole to a prisoner who is sentenced to a term of imprisonment of 1 year or less, or to a straight penalty and those fixed penalty, meaning ilang penalty kay wa may minimum term like death penalty and life imprisonment kay wa man ni sila minimum og maximum, mao na siya gitawag og indeterminate sentence. How long is the period of parole? For example, ang minimum sa imong sentensya is 10 years. Ang maximum is 16 years. Unsa ang grantahay imong parole, syempre after nimo ma-serve ang minimum nga 10 years. Ang imong parole mag-last na laman og 6 years kay 6 years naman lamang ang remaining sa 16 years nimo nga sentensya. Meaning mahuman imong parole until expiration or pagkahuman sa maximum sa imong sentensya. Mag-serve gihapon kag 6 years sa gawas sa prisuhan para mahuman ang imong maximum sentence nga 16 years. What happens to a parole if the conditions of parole are violated? The parole shall be rearrested and recommitted or returned to prison to serve an expired portion of the maximum period of his sentence. What is the document released to certify that parole is successfully completed by the parole? After the expiration of maximum sentence of a client, the board shall, upon recommendation of the chief probation and parole officer, that the client has substantially complied with all the conditions of his parole or pardon, shall issue certificate of final release and discharge to a parole or pardon.
Good evening, ma'am. Good morning, classmate. My topic is PPA. Parole and Prevention Administration. To affect the rehabilitation and of evaluators and parolees and the first-time minor drugs offenders as protected law and socially responsible members of community thought. Number 1, will planning supervisor program program for probationers and parolees and pardoners and first minor in drugs offenders which are illegal national program of the government. Number 2, establishment of the innovative and finally finishable projects for the oral, spiritual, and economic. The right community modely and restorative justice principle and constant and use the volunteer prevention ages. Number one, individual and group counseling. Number two, moral, spiritual values for formation. Number three, job or work placement. Number four, vocational and livelihood and skill training. Number five, health, mental and medical service. 6, literacy and education. Number 7, community service. Number 8, claim the self-help organization. Number 9, payment of liability. Number 10, environment and ecology. That's all. Thank you.
The Board of Probation and Parole. For other offenders, the Parole Board will consider each inmate's personal characteristics such as age, mental stability, marital status, and prior criminal record. Parole boards do not grant parole to offenders simply for good behavior exhibited during incarceration. The parole board will also consider the nature of severity of offense committed, the length of sentence served, and inmate's degree of remorse of the offense. Finally, the parole board will examine the inmate's ability to establish a permanent residence and obtain gainful employment upon release. Parole will be granted if there is no apparent threat to public safety and the inmate is willing and able to re-enter the community. Purpose: non-institutional corrections refer to the method of correcting sentence offenders without having to go prison. The institution protects society from dangerous criminals. It focuses on modern community correctional programs of rehabilitation to the exclusion of punishment, deterrence, and incapacitation of criminal offenders.
Good evening, Mom. My topic is all about the advantage of the non-institutional correction. The advantage of this is less costly on the part of government. The offender's family need not suffer since the offender will not be sent away from then, and he will still be able to go on with his life and livelihood, thereby enabling him to support his family. Kanang mo dyan ni siya ang pinakadakong advantage, ma'am, sa non-institutional correction kay ang offender makatrabaho paghihapon siya para makasuporta sa siyang pamilya na siya sa gawas na maklaya gihapon siya o unsa siyang gustong buhaton or gusto nga makatrabaho siya samtang nagsige paghiring sa iyang kaso mo na pinakadako nga kuan nga makasuporta pa siya sa iyang pamilya samtang nagsige paghiring dili ingon nga kanang naa na siya dito sa sod na pa siya kagawsanan nga makasuporta o makatabang pa sa iyang pamilya mo na siya ang pinaka advantage sa non-institutional correction. Thank you. Hi, good evening everyone. My topic is all about the disadvantage of non-institutional correction. The most prominent advantage of community correction can also be its greatest disadvantage. The public safety may be compromised. Muna siya ang ang disadvantage po kay o kintahay na sa gawas ang offender. Kanang he can still continue what he's doing. Kanang og usa pa pod kanang ingana dili jud malikan nga kanang naay posibilidad nga usa or naa sa iyang pamilya ang makasundog ug unsa siyang buhaton or siya ang motudlo para buhaton ni ingana. Ug usa pa dili pud nato malikan nga mahadlok ta mo jud na mahadlok ta nga na siya sa gawas kay ug mo na jud na naanan nga binuhatan mo kamit jud na siya nga og crime ug unsa iyang mga naandan nga buluhaton nga dili maayo mo na siya ang disadvantage kay wa na ang public safety na to puta kay baw kay kintahay ka na siya rape siya unsa na siya sa gawas da mahadlok na budget jud ta jadi jud malikan nga basin lagi na mausob na pud ang dagat siya manahon nga samtang na siya sa gawas na sige siya giring naabita siya sa gawas mao jang unana na siya sa gawas aw bitaw kuan nga na mo punay pinakadako nga disadvantage kanang na siya sa gawas makabuhat siya crime o gustohon niya. That is all.